Alright, hello again everyone. Now we're going to focus on animating our character. The objective is to have the character jump onto this box, then he jumps onto this box again. So the assignment that you have been given is to animate a 3D character jumping onto an object. And for this assignment you have to make the character jump more than once. Now, before we can attempt a jump inside Maya, or any 3D software, you have to have reference materials. And the process of analyzing reference materials is known as action analysis. So action analysis is this is the process of studying motion by using reference materials to assist in the animation of the characters. Reference materials may be videos, cameras, pictures, books, and diagrams. So in this case, we're going to utilize the Richard Williams Survival Kit book, which I'll utilize the images of the key poses for the jumps to complete this assignment. Now when we talk about industry standard and how they do animation in the industry, they utilize a lot of reference material. They would either video themselves doing an action, and then they would study that action by studying the video. They would break down the main key poses to do the blocking, and then once the blocking would be putting in the main key poses. Then after the blocking, they would then utilize the in-between. They would try and utilize the graph editor or the different tweens to get a smooth action by splining it. So we're going to identify the main key poses of a jump when animating this character. Now, let us look at some of the main key poses of the jump. There are 7 of them which we've identified. So, the main key poses of the jump are, we're going to have the character standing. He's going to go into an antic, which when the character bends down, anticipation. You have the takeoff pose, hang time. Some refer to it as the mid-air. You have the contact pose, the squash pose, and the settle pose. So those are the 7 key poses. And here are the diagrams showing the key poses of the 7 different jumps. So we have the first jump, which is the standing pose. Then the character goes down into the antic. Then you have the takeoff. Then you have the mid-air or the hang time, followed by the contact, down into the squash, and then he recovers. So what we did was we utilized a video for reference material. So the video that we utilized was of a man. He's jumping onto a step, and what we did, we used QuickTime Player, and we analyzed frame by frame when he moves from the standing position down into the antic. Then he moves into the takeoff position, which would be right here. That is at around frame 39. He then goes into the mid-air position. Then the contact pose, down into the squash, and then he has the recovery. So we utilize this reference material here and to get the data, the key poses. So let us look at the key pose data that we have. We have we've recorded that the standing occurs at around frame 0 or frame 1. Antic, when the character gets into his anticipation at frame 33, takeoff at 39, hang time 42, contact 47, squash 50, and so forth. So we're going to utilize this data to animate the character. Alright, so let's get started. Now, what we want to do is to add a keyframe. We're going to utilize these control curves on this character here to animate him jumping. And as you can see, we have our timeline down here. Now, to add a keyframe to a character, you can select one of these control curves here and press S. What that will do is that will create a vertical red line on the timeline, and it will keyframe all of the values over here in the channel box. But what we want to do, we want to keyframe this character in its standing position. So what we do, we're going to highlight the entire character like this, and then we're going to press S. What that will do is that will assign a keyframe on all of the main key poses. the mid control, the top part, the foot controls, the main controls, that will assign keyframes on all of the characters' controls. This is important when animating, because if we have to make sure that the auto key is on, so that when you're animating it automatically assigns keyframes. But if you don't highlight the character and assign a keyframe to it, then it will you will run into problems and issues when animating this character. So we keyframe the first key pose when this character is standing, which is the standing pose here at 0. So the next key pose that we're going to focus on is the anti-key pose, which we're going to focus on the one where he's squatting here. So we're going to pose that character. Posing is very important. So what we're going to do, we're going to go to frame 33, zoom in on the character, and it's very important that you rotate around your camera view because we're dealing with 3 dimension, and you don't want to, the habit that we have with 2D is that we would animate things from the profile view, but you want to rotate the camera to get better view of what is happening. We're going to, at frame 33, we're going to go into our move control and squat the character down like this. Then we're going to go to our rotation, and we're going to rotate him forward like that. Go to our move tool, push him forward, push him. So I'm getting the character into the antic pose, and we want to utilize a bit of squash. So we're going to utilize the top control here, and we're going to squash this down. So we have the character in a squash pose, and when we're satisfied with the pose, what we do, we highlight the character and press S to keyframe all of it. So when I scrub through the 2 main keyframes, we can see that our character is moving in the anticipation position here. So we have that key pose. When we go back to the notes, we're going to pose the character in the takeoff position. Now the takeoff position happens at frame 39. So you're going to go to frame 39 on the timeline here, and we're going to start posing the character. Now, as it stands right now, I have auto key on. If you don't have auto key on, it won't save the keyframes as you go along. To ensure that you have auto key on, we're going to go to Windows, Settings and Preferences, and over into Preferences. And we're going to go under the Setting tab here in Animation, and ensure that auto key is selected on and off, which is right here. So auto key is on, you will be able to animate the character. So the takeoff pose happens at around frame 39. So we're going to pose the character in the takeoff at frame 39. I'm going to grab the central control and move him up like this. This will take the character a bit off the ground, but that's fine. These 2 feet controls will be pointed downwards. So what I did was to select both of these and rotate them down like this. Alright, so we're going to select both of these controls here and rotate them down. As you can see, they're both pointing into the ground. That's fine. We're going to fix that later by initiating the toe roll in the channel box here. We're going to push this character rig forward a bit like this, and we're going to select the top, because now the character would be stretched. He would no longer be squashed. So I would drag this up to have the character stretched like that. We can see the character is now moving forward into a stretch position, but the problem we have is that these toe, we need to have the toe bending. So what we're going to do, we're going to select both of these control curves for the feet, and we're going to go over into the channel box to where it says toe roll. If you click on the word toe roll here, because you can type the values in here, and you can click on the word toe roll. If you click on the word toe roll, move the mouse over into the camera view and hold down on the middle mouse. Notice the cursor of the mouse changes to 2 arrows pointing left and right. So when you hold down the middle mouse button, you drag left and right, and you notice that controls how the toes bend. Another way you can do it is to type in the values here. So I type in -30, and that would give me the values right there. Notice now that the character is a bit off the ground, so what I can do is just grab this central control here and maybe push him down a bit so that there's contact with the ground. So this is a crucial part of anime. You want to ensure that the character is in contact with the ground. So when we scrub through our values, we can see that he's now jumping into the takeoff position. Now remember, once you're satisfied with this pose, you highlight the entire character by dragging a box around it, and notice that all of the control curves are selected, and you press S. And this will keyframe all of the values. The next key pose is the hang time pose at frame 42. So we're going to go back to our character. We're going to go to 42. And we're going to start posing the character. Now, one thing you don't want to do, you do not want to grab the character like this and lift him off the ground using the central control curve here. Because what this does is that he leaves behind his foot controls here. Notice he's up in the air and he leaves behind his foot control. So we don't want a situation like that, because when we start, it renders these controls not up, they're not able to be functional. So I'm going to undo this, and I'm going to show you how to lift the character off the ground for the mid-air. The mid-air pose is this pose where he's in the air. He's in the air, and we're going to pose that character. Notice that how the feet are bent. Notice that how well defined this pose is. You want the key to having good animation is to having strong key poses, and that is why it's very important that you utilize reference materials. So we're going to go back to the Maya, and we're going to lift this character off the ground. To lift this character, we're going to utilize the main control, which is this triangle here. This triangle that you see, that controls the overall position of this character. And when I move him up in the air, notice that all of his controls are following him. And that is what we want, so that we can pose the character when he's in the mid-air. So we're going to lift the character off the ground. I'm going to push him forward a bit, closer to the box. Bring him here, lift him up in the air like this. So we have the character positioned in the mid-air pose. What I'm going to do now, I'm going to select the foot controls here, both of them by holding shift and selecting both of them. I'm going to lift them up like this, because the legs are going to be bent. Now look what happens when I move the legs forward. You see, notice that the knees are bending backwards. Now when we're posing the character, we have to, with this particular rig, we have to be mindful of the knee controls. These two circles here, they're the knee controls. And if the foot, I'm going to select the foot control. If the foot passes the knee control, it flips backwards. So what we have to do with that, we have to ensure that these two knee controls, that they're always ahead of the character. So I'm going to create a little room here that we can, when I come back here and I move the foot forward, it doesn't flip backwards. So we have this foot like this. I'm going to move this foot forward like that. This foot is a bit elevated, so this foot will be up like that. Maybe this foot will be down. Now what the knee control also does, if I select the knee control here and I move it left and right, look what happens to the knee. It controls the orientation of the knee. So that is the function of the knee control, and you want to ensure that they are not behind the foot. Now, when we look closely at the foot, we notice that the toes are still bent, because at the previous pose, we had turned the toe roll on. So what we're going to do, we're going to put the toe roll value to 0 so that the toes are straight. So we're going to select both of them. And in the channel box where you see the toe roll value, you're going to click on that value and you're going to type 0 to bring the toes back to 0. What we'll also do is, notice we have the stretch on the character. We don't need the character to be stretched when it's in the mid-air. So we're going to select the top control up here and move it down so that the character's head is in its normal position. when we go back to the reference image, I want you to notice that the foot is pointing up. This particular foot is pointing up and this one is pointing down. So with the posing of this character, we want this foot here, we're going to rotate it up a bit. And we're going to move it forward so that it's pointing up. But notice that the foot is going into the body of the character. So we have to be mindful of that. The rig has limitations, so we have to know how to pose this character. Notice it looks a little bit weird. So it's not only posing the character from the profile view. You want to rotate around your character because remember we're dealing with 3D. I'm going to move this over and maybe just rotate this over in this direction. I'm going to just move the knee control over a bit. So I have the knee going in that direction. This foot is fine here. Now, as it relates to how this character is posed, I'm going to select the main control triangle here and just move it up a bit. So we get a little bit of elevation of him getting ready to jump. I'm going to move him up a bit. So what we want to have is we want to have a nice arc of the character jumping onto a box. Let me see if I can draw something with the grease pencil here. We want to have a nice arc of the character jumping on that box because I will be grading for arcs. So let's look at what we have here. We have the standing position, the antic position, takeoff position, we have the mid-air position. So now we need to pose the contact position. I'm going to undo the use of the grease pencil. Going to just move him up a bit more. Now the contact pose. The contact pose is when he's now touching the ground. And when you can either delay it with one foot or have both feet touching the ground. When we look at the timing data that we got from the video, the keyframe that the contact pose happens that is at frame 47. So we're going to go to frame 47 on the timeline. We'll go to frame 47. And we're going to now just move this character over a bit here. Move him closer to the box. And notice that I'm using the main triangle here. Move him closer over onto the box. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to use the foot controls and straighten out his feet. Straighten out the feet like that. And how I'm going to do this, I'm going to delay one foot in the air like this. So one foot will be delayed, and this really will create a bit of dynamic to the animation in terms of the principle of follow through. I'm going to just straighten the character like that. Have his legs straighten up like that. Push him back like that. I'm going to have this foot. Put a bit more exaggeration into your poses. Exaggeration is another principle that's very important. So one could say, alright, I could leave the contact pose like this, but it's not exaggerated enough because the pose isn't well defined. So I'm going to now, to make this pose more defined, I'm going to lift this foot up, rotate this foot pointing like this, moving forward. As time goes by with enough practice, you will have an understanding how to utilize this character rig. I mean, it's like operating a Rubik's Cube. All of this comes second nature. The body of this character can be tilted back like that. And we're going to put some stretch on the top part of the body here. Move this part a bit forward. Maybe tilt the body back. Knees bending back. So whenever you see the knee, whenever you see the knee bending down like that, it's because of the knee controls. So you want to ensure that the knee controls, in this case I'd move up the knee control. I'll select both of them and move them up. So notice that the knee comes up back. You want to have, maybe you can even rotate this part a little bit like that, so it look a bit more natural. Let me just put this to transparent. Not that one, the box. So sometimes when the foot control gets into the box, in the layer area here, turn it to T so that you can, you know, get a control of the control curve and change it back. Once you're satisfied with this pose, you highlight everything and press S. Oh, for the mid-ear pose, I didn't highlight everything and press S. So even sometimes I forget to highlight it. You want to highlight because you don't want to get in any problems. So you ensure that all of your control curves are keyframed, and you highlight everything and press S. So when we're scrubbing through our animation, we notice that we have the standing, antic, takeoff, and notice, see that arc? So we're having the pose right there. For this one, I can probably move him back a bit to make so that the arc looks a little bit more natural. So we're seeing a nice little arc in terms of the jump. The next key pose will be the squash. The squash happens at frame 50. So we're going to go to frame 50 on our timeline. And we're going to pose the squash pose, which is the pose after the takeoff, where he's squashed down. See, this pose is similar to the antic pose. So, you know, it won't be hard to pose. So we'll just move this forward a bit. Maybe rotate the body like that. Press W, the move tool, and move this down. I mean, there are different ways in which you can pose the character, but once you have an understanding of the control curves, it won't be a problem. It's just practice that you need. You know, I'm just posing the character. So be mindful that the foot don't go into the ground. We can look. Alright, so the foot wants to go down a bit more. Let me just write this one here. Let me put the ground to this one to T. I'm going to flatten this one like that. See, you have to ensure that you rotate around your character. Posing takes a very long time, you know. A professional animator takes a lot of time to ensure that his pose is accurate. Can push this the character this forward, because remember, he's going forward with momentum, you know. The legs would be a bit more bent. Here would be squashed. That looks good. So let's put back the box to shaded. Alright, this foot looks a bit synced into the ground. Let me just lift that up a bit so it's not too much. The knee looks weird in this position, so it's just a knee control. Where's the knee controls? Up here. So this knee control needs to come forward like that. No, it's too much. So I mean, you go with the flow, you know, in terms of posing this character. Alright, so that's how, you know, maybe rotate him a bit like that. Alright. What we do, when we're satisfied with the pose, highlight everything and press S. So let's cycle through the different key poses that we have. Going from the standing into the antic, into the takeoff, going into the hang time or mid-air pose, down into the takeoff, down into the squash. So we have most of the key poses done. So we have the squash. Now what we need to do is the settle. So let's focus on the settle. After the squash, he then comes up. Notice the second pose down here, how they exaggerate him coming up, then down. So the next pose happens at around frame 58. So we're going to ensure that we're going to go to frame 58. I'm going to move the character up. So once we have the shuttle pose established, we're going to rotate the head up a bit like this. We're going to highlight everything and press S. Alright, we need to now get the recovery pose, which happens at frame 60. Now, by doing the recovery pose, the settle pose, let's go back to the settle pose. What I would do with the settle pose, notice that he's very stretched right here. So what I would do with the settle pose is bring this up a bit and have him come up like that. Then at frame 60, zoom in on to get frame 60. At frame 60, we're going to have the character come down a bit. And come down like this, so that we get a little bounce at the end. When we're satisfied with that, we'll highlight everything and we'll press S. So let us look to see what we have in terms of this jump. We're going to press the play button and see how the jump looks. So as you can see, we have the character jumping onto the box. Let's look at it from this angle. So what I observed that is wrong with this jump is that the initial part has this long tween between frame 0 and 33. So in order to prevent this long tween from happening at the beginning of the video, what we're going to do, highlight all of the controls of this character so that we can get all of the keyframe information. So we're going to copy the keyframe at frame 0 and paste it at frame 20 so that he stands still for the first 20 frames, and then after frame 20 he can then go into the antic pose. That way it won't look like a long pose, a long tween. Now here's what you need to understand. In order to copy a keyframe, you go up to the keyframe, right click on it, and you know that you're on the keyframe, that when you look into the channel box you can see the red value. When you're on the spline you will see that they're pink. But you go to the frame 0, right click on it and click copy. Then we're going to go to frame 20, right click on the timeline and click paste. What we have here, we have those keyframes copied and pasted. So for between frame 0 to 20 nothing will happen. So when we press the play button, nothing happens, and then you see that the antic looks much better because he's held in a stationary position for the first 20 frames, then he gets down into the antic pose. Usually when you're doing your playback in Maya, you want to go to the preferences to make sure that it is playing at 24 frames per second. So we'll go to Windows, Settings and Preferences, we'll go over to time slider. In the preferences you want to not time slider, you go down to playback, ensure that it is set at 24 frames per second. Click save. Alright, so that is how you animate the character jumping on the first box. Now we're going to show you how to do the second jump in a later video.